So have you seen it, Brian?
Nope.
Okay, I'm gonna read it then.
Okay.
The Joint Public Pension Oversight Committee shall. Huh?
I can read it if you want.
Okay, great.
I was only just meeting, so I didn't know.
No, that would be great. Here.
I have a copy. So Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. Are we live?
Oh, there we go. Yes, we are.
Okay.
For some reason, it doesn't say live on these screens.
Oh, this is the as introduced. I think I sent you the amendment earlier.
I can send it if you don't have it.
And that was the one that I was going to send off to Tony.
So that's good you didn't.
Got
Here.
project.
Here.
So this is the amendment is a strike-all amendment to the bill as introduced. So it is setting up the bill as introduced was also a study, but this study the language of the study has changed here. So the Public Pension Oversight Committee is still the one conducting the study, and it's in consultation with the state treasurer, the chair of the Vermont Pension Investment Commission, and any interested stakeholders with investment and environmental expertise. And they are directed to develop a strategy and timeline for the state to decarbonize the investment policies of the state employees retirement system, the teacher system, and the municipal employees retirement system. The strategy and plan developed by the committee shall be in accordance with sound investment criteria and consistent with the fiduciary obligations of the retirement board for each system. In developing the plan, the committee is also asked to consider the feasibility of different decarbonization strategies and review models used in other states for decarbonization. Subsection B of the bill is a reporting requirement that says the committee before January 15th of next year shall submit a report on the strategy and timeline described in subsection A to the House and Senate Committees on Government Operations. The section 2 of the bill is the effective date, and the act would take effect on July 1st of this year. And after the bill passes, the title would be changed to an act relating to the study of divestment of state pension funds for fossil fuel interests.
So the report was due January of 2023.
January 15th.
Yeah, they've already done, as you know, a huge amount of work.
Yes, okay. And is this language that Tom worked?
It was sent to everybody. All of us participated. Tom, Beth, and Beth actively participated with Chris and Anthony and Keisha and me
Some of
yesterday.
the language was language that Tom presented or suggested.
Yeah, and that we all,
The part about in accordance with sound investment criteria, consistent with the fiduciary obligations, et cetera. That was the language that he felt.
Yeah, that's why I stopped sharing to see if they had come yet. They haven't.
Okay. So this is language that they.
yeah, and we got it fairly late last night, and I haven't heard from them, but I also haven't had any time to get an email. So it's been it's always that kind of thing.
One clarifying question. I just want to make sure I understand the kind of term of art, decarbonizing our investment policies. That seems specific as opposed to like decarbonizing our investment.
Right, and I would really like us to get rid of policies and just say decarbonize our investments, the investments.
That was a comment that
Yeah, we have to.
from Tom yesterday.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if that has a significant.
Right, you can ask them.
Yeah.
But that was my only comment.
Yeah.
And I am noticing that in the title, it does go to refer to divestment, so I don't know if
Right.
that should be changed to the study of decarbonization.
Decarbonizing our pension funds.
I mean, I guess I just want to say before we completely erase the word that what New York did was an overall timeline for decarbonization with phased divestments to achieve decarbonization. So they, this requires them to just report back on the strategy and timeline, which I suppose will then have annual updates on divestment,
Yeah.
but I don't want to get rid of the word divestment because it's along the path to decarbonize.
Absolutely,
I would agree.
agree, thank you.
Sorry, so you want to keep the title as
Yeah,
is?
and we could, Keisha, where would you add that with, or is it just, I think it's with the timeline, it's assumed. that
Right.
The phase in, I mean, I think that's what, part of what the
It
strategy.
could be like in developing the strategy and plan, the committee shall devise the phases of divestment. And that's kind of what New York did, is like create an immediate schedule of divestment.
And
So it shall consider the feasibility of different decarbonization strategies in phases? Or-
well, it's got,
Decarbonization strategies,
it's got
including
it.
divestment. Should say including divestment.
I think one of the strategies would be phased
Right.
investment. So I think we can leave it simply like this, but it would be great to have, but, so I think if we're trying to keep it,
We could say shall recommend divestment phases.
So
and recommend,
I don't know that we need to tell them to do it in phases. My guess is that
that's part of the strategy.
that would be part of the strategy. And
I'd agree.
But
I think
I do have a comment on line 12. That I
on the
think,
first page,
um,
line 12.
yes, there
section.
is no line 12 on the second page, but I think that one of the things that I heard Keisha say is that get rid of the investment policies. And what might make sense here is to develop a strategy and timeline for policies of the state to decarbonize the investments.
That might work.
So
yeah.
that you're asking them to develop a policy, because you do want them to develop a policy, and it isn't the policy that is gonna be decarbonized, but it's, so, and timeline for, let's see, how did I write it? Timeline for the state policies,
For the policies of the state, I think.
yeah, for the policies of the state to decarbonize
The investments.
Yeah.
With an S.
Yeah.
Of the Vermont state employees. That's good, I think.
Because I think that might, because what we're asking them to do is to develop some policies here to move us in that direction, get us there. That's, and we're not suggesting the timeline or anything, and then they'll bring that in January.
I guess like the other thing for me is I don't know if states have articulated how you continue to measure sound investment criteria against approaching climate failure. Or, like, I wonder if the states that set this in motion said something more than what would currently be considered sound investment criteria, because
Well, sound investment criteria would not have you investing in things that are huge liabilities.
I think this language actually was from the Maine legislation.
okay,
So
I just was
Yeah, he said
questioning.
And I think we want to be careful not to
Prescribed.
be too prescriptive here, and VPIC and the treasurer's office also have, what is it called, ESG or EGS policies that, it's energy, sound, whatever that
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Tom will tell us
But
what those are called. What are they called, Tom?
I guess I'm missing the question. What?
well, I just said that we don't want to be too prescriptive here because you already have some policies around moving in that direction, and I couldn't remember if it's ESG or some letters like that that you have.
Well, yeah, we have an ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance policy for
Okay.
we also have a proposed carbon policy, which has been referred to our ESG subcommittee. So the carbon policy would probably be a sub policy of the overall ESG VPIC policy that we developed.
If I may, Tom, I think we wanted to call it a carbon reduction policy.
That's correct, yeah.
So I'm going to suggest here that we suggested a change and see what on line 12 on page 1. So it would say, develop a strategy and timeline of state policies to decarbonize.
I thought
Or
you said for the policies of the
to
state.
timeline for policies of the state to decarbonize the investments.
Of the,
So that we're asking you to develop the policy. Yeah.
I have one question on this proposed language, and it's a little confusing. Are you asking the Joint Public Pension Oversight Committee to do this, or are you asking VPIC to do this? Because it
No, we're
sounds to me
I
like
guess
you're
we're
asking
asking them. It says here we're asking them to do it.
Yeah, we in concert with us, which is fine. I just wanted to make sure that this isn't a VPIC directive,
No.
and it'll be directed by the subcommittee. Okay, thank you.
yes, we have.
Yes, I think it is the Joint Pension Oversight Committee working with the state treasurer, the chair of VPIC, and interested stakeholders. So they are the ones that are charged with doing it.
Okay.
So is this,
Would that change?
Would
does this meet people's needs?
To move it forward, I think it does.
I'm
I
asking.
make- Well, the two comments I'd have on it. I know the title of divestment, I thought we were going to call it decarbonization or the decarbonization policy to be consistent. And then the second thing is, I really suggest you add a line item for dollars for this Joint Public Pension Oversight Committee to have, at least at the outset.
Wait, Allison, let him finish.
And that would be my two comments that I think
Can you say the second one again?
I would suggest adding a line item in here for the Joint Public Pension Oversight Committee to have some dollars to actually perform this function, whether or not we've got to hire people or whether or not we bring people in or bring in further consultant work, because there isn't anything in the budget, at least the proposed budget for fiscal 23 for this with VPIC. And I don't know if Beth, you have any in your budget, but I know they cut out a person in our budget. So I just want to make sure you should list some dollar amount that they could have at their disposal, whether they use it or not, or whether we're able to do this internally and work with them better. I think it's important to have something there.
What would you put?
I'd put about 50,000
Okay,
because it cost us about 40 to 60 when we did it in 2017. So I'd put something like that amount in.
If I could, Madam Chair, I would suggest a little bit more because it was between 40 and 60,000, and that was 2017. So you might want to go up to 75 or something. You don't want to have to come back. I know the task force, for instance, got a little tight on money as it finished its process. So you want to give it some room so that you can hire folks that can provide the professional expertise you're looking for.
Can I?
yeah.
So the more money we allocate, the more prescriptive I feel like being that this can't achieve the same results as 2017. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding your interpretation of decarbonization versus divestment, and that we're not just going to hear a majority of shareholder activism again, but that this language moves us toward a timeline for divestments that are phased that lead to decarbonization of the portfolio.
Could I respond to that, please?
Yes, please.
So I think that the idea here is to look at a strategy and determine what the right strategy is, and not to predetermine what the process should be. I mean, what the result will be. And Again, I think you need professionals to help us and to work through this. You don't want to get in a position where you don't have sufficient dollars. We're talking about developing a strategy. We're talking about developing a policy. And before we determine what it is, we should actually take the time to do it right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always leery of studies that have a presupposed outcome.
I'm just leery of a repeat of 2017. And we're here because there is a growing number of people who don't believe that that is an acceptable outcome for this
Well,
report.
I'd argue though, Senator, with all due respect, is that the 2017 outcome resulted in significant changes to VPIC at the time. And we've made significant progress since that time, including investing over 200 million in a low carbon index fund, which at that point we never even had the opportunity, and BlackRock came to the table because of our efforts. So I think there have been significant progress. I think this proposal would help us identify the issues within VPIC that could be constraints on timeline and could maybe define that timeline in a better way.
Yeah.
Because if it comes back and says, if you do this immediately, you're going to jeopardize certain issues of the portfolio, which we'd have to then reevaluate, I'd be very concerned. So I think, to me, it would be a very helpful study to further our work from 2017 and not to diminish the accomplishments that I think Beth's office performed in that study, because I think we've accomplished all 5 of the recommendations that were recommended at that time.
I guess I'm just still curious how you're defining the difference between divestment and decarbonization.
Well, divestment to me is you don't have any stocks whatsoever after a certain point. And I view it more as a timeline of implementation, because quite frankly, we may not be able to get completely divested given the current strategy of Vermont using index funds. And so, for example, our low carbon fund still has somebody could define it as, it depends on how you define that term. Some people view complete divestment as getting out of ExxonMobil. Some view it as getting out of the top 10 reserves. Some view it as the top 200. I think part of this study can help define that. And then you'll have then you can have a roadmap to what are benchmarks of success. New York pushed it out to 2040. Hopefully we wouldn't have to do it that far, but.
New York pushed it up to 2040, but they did set a timeline for divestment.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
much more imminent.
Yeah.
From Exxon, from shale oil, from.
Yeah.
So.
And I think a report could help tell us, if we do that, this is what it will impact in regards to a budget for VPIC. We may have to add 5 people because we will no longer be able to index in the way that we've been doing it in the past. And it may identify changes that we would have to over time structure into VPIC. It could identify the issues that we brought up between direct or indirect holdings and immediate effect.
I think we're getting too far into this. What this is asking is for this group to come up with a study that has those timelines and what we need to do and how we need to approach this. We're not going to come up with that sitting here.
I just don't want to get rid of the word divestment, and I want to understand what's happening with the difference between divestment and decarbonization.
If I could talk to that, Madam Chair. I think that when we talked and had this discussion, we talked about decarbonization as a policy and working forward. Divestment, in this bill, you have some discussion of fiduciary responsibility. I think, as I said earlier, that we should beef that up a little bit, and I have some suggestions on that. But we do have to manage our fiduciary responsibility in this process as well. And I would argue that New York has we talk about engagement, and we got to do more than that. New York has an engage, and then depending on the results of that engagement, make another decision. We have to have that conversation and look at it in the light of different strategies, how to do it. And we believe that the word divestment comes with a connotation that you've already had you've already decided what the results are going to be. We want to do the right thing on the environment. We want to do the right thing for our employees. We want to make sure that the right thing for our retirees. We have a fiduciary responsibility to that. And we've committed to a process of lowering our carbon footprint. And we would love to do more. But to put out there what you think the result should be, I think is premature. And I do believe the word divestment comes with that connotation. And we would rather have a process that brings in all ideas and all suggestions and look at what states are doing, whether it's New York or Maine. And I would recommend that as a change.
Allison.
So I would propose the following title, if you could live with this, because I think you're looking at many of us who, and we compromised yesterday and came up with this proposal, and I would like you to consider compromising on the title. I would call it an act relating to the decarbonization and phased in divestment of state pension funds from fossil fuel companies.
So I don't know how they feel about that.
I'll just say it again, an
Yeah,
act
you did say
related to
Yes,
decarbonization and phase in divestment
Yes.
of state pension funds.
So I do think that, and I don't have a dog in this fight at all, but I do understand that what Tom was saying is that divestment will we ever be able to say we have truly divested every single dollar of ours from anything that has anything to do with fossil fuels? Because if we use indexed, and I don't understand these theories very much at all, and my banker will attest to this, but if we have 3 stocks in some place that sells.
Yeah, you're right, it may not.
But we're saying here that that is what we're, and so divestment means fully, not
It doesn't
ever.
mean fully necessarily.
Yeah, yes, that's what divestment means, it's fully removing.
Two thoughts. One is we're talking about divesting to the greatest possible position.
That isn't what this says.
Yeah, but I think that's logically what people would think,
Yeah, exactly.
divesting 100% or 90% or 80%, we're gonna divest, it's the greatest goal possible. The other thing is, divestment seems to imply that total divestment, you're predicting the outcome.
Yeah.
Why do we not feel the same way about decarbonization? Why don't we say decarbonization means it's 100% decarbonization and we're predicting an outcome? I don't see why we're assuming we're predicting an outcome when we use the word divestment, but we're not predicting an outcome when we use the word decarbonization.
And that's why.
So I'm gonna go to Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I feel probably as strongly about not having the word divestment in the title as others in the room may feel as strongly to include it. My question is, and it's for Beth and Tom, are there not other ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint that have nothing to do with divestment? Can't we invest in companies that are, we don't know what technology is going to bring in the next 5 years. There could be a company that all of a sudden comes on the scene that would help us reduce our carbon footprint.
No, I'll argue that point.
Just wait, Tom.
Well, I'm just
Let
saying,
Brian finish.
I don't think divestment is the only way to reduce our carbon footprint. I guess what I'm saying.
Okay, I'm gonna, if we're, that, Anthony, what you just said is entirely new to me. When you said that we're talking about divesting to the greatest extent possible. Because that is not what this said. The original bill said fully divested by 2027. That's what the original one said. So in this case, divestment means fully divested.
Nowhere in the bill does it say fully
Then
divested.
it doesn't
right?
say divested in the bill anywhere. And so why would it be in the title?
Because our partners here asked us to.
Yes, I realize that, but so
Right, so
if
we're
you want
now-
to say to relating to decarbonization and divestment to the fullest extent possible. But I don't,
Okay.
I think we're arguing about, do we agree with the concept of the amendment?
We can figure out.
I mean, I don't want to speak for the group, but I think we are trying to follow a path that now exists in other states where they have taken aim at some of the most harmful fossil fuel extractions, new exploration, new pipelines, new creation of fossil fuel distribution and creation and activity, and said, we want to divest. We do not want to participate in new fossil fuel extraction. And then looked at strategies over a decade plus, 2 decades, that decarbonize the entire portfolio as industries decarbonize themselves, as there are new choices to make. I don't want decarbonize to become a greenwashing word for like pick and choose some low carbon solutions. I think that I would like us to show a commitment to divesting from oil and gas exploration companies that are, you know, continuing to be bad actors around environmental practices and want to open up ecologically sensitive area. I mean, when you look at what New York did, they started a process of divesting from some of the things that are accelerating climate change past the point of climate failure. And I just want that intent to live on,
Right. No.
because that is important. That's important to me.
So I get that all.
But what this says is divestment from fossil fuel companies. So will we ever be able to say we are 100% divested of any investment into any fossil fuel company? That's what this says.
Right, and I think that that is the challenge of this work and coming up with a policy and a strategy and a timeline to take us to the fullest point possible. Obviously, many companies still use plastic bags as are made of fossil fuels. I mean,
Right.
as Tom has said, there are many companies that are using materials that are made by fossil fuels.
Yes.
You cannot possibly divest of everything that uses materials and some aspects of the fossil fuel industry, but you can fully divest from the major companies who are the major actors in an industry that is destroying our planet.
That is creating new fossil fuel.
Yes,
I get that. I'm going to step back here. I think we're arguing about one word. We're arguing about one word here. And if Anthony says divest to the fullest extent possible, that's very different than saying we're going to divest.
well, we're talking about a strategy and
No,
a plan timeline.
I'm talking about the title. You
Okay.
want,
How about a new title?
I think just from this conversation, what I would say may or not help is that we don't have a definition of what constitutes a fossil fuel company. What percentage of their activity is exploration and extraction of fossil fuels? There are lots of companies that are transitioning to being energy companies that are not fossil fuel companies. But we are asking for a phase out of investment in companies or activities that are majority fossil fuel extraction.
well, that's what this study will do over the summer.
Right, I just think, I think we're hoping not to lose the word divestment as a more immediate way to no longer invest in new oil and gas infrastructure and exploration.
All right, well, that isn't what this says. So,
May I ask a question, please?
yes,
So if you're talking about everything in fossil fuels, there was a level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 is direct fossil fuels. Number 2 is where your company results in some fossil fuel indirect activities. And the third is everything else but that, you know. So you're talking about supply chain, you're talking about all sorts of things. So I don't know if you folks have gone through that process of looking at those studies. We've asked companies to give us what they do on all those three, and I'm not sure the right term is stages, but there's a level 1, 2, and 3 to this. And if you say fossil fuel, divestment from all carbon, do you mean everything in the supply chain or not? And I think that we really need to have a carbon. I'm looking at the comptroller's office, and he's talking about in his summary of the next step in Comptroller DiNapoli's climate action plan. 2040 net zero emissions target, a commitment to transition the fund to a net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2040. Establish interim trajectory goals to measure progress. Increased engagement with portfolio companies to achieve net zero emissions, including working against directors at the companies that fail to manage climate risks. A review of energy sector investments by 2025, and transparency measures and annual progress report and updates. What we're talking about is frankly generalizations about this. What we need to do is get down to what our low carbon goals are and how we can reach them and still meet the fiduciary responsibilities of the VPIC and the retirement boards.
Are you saying that, wait, let her finish.
I'll stop there.
Okay, Senator Ram Hinsdale?
Are you not seeing on that page that you're looking at divestment commitments? Because that is different information than what I saw from what came out of communications from that office that were specific 5-year commitments to divestment. So either we're looking at different information or it's just incomplete from what you're looking at.
Well, I came away with a different understanding of New York's policies. And if we're going to make something based on that, maybe we need to check it out and have that conversation, or go with a definition that allows us the flexibility. Within the decarbonization is divestment. Within the definition of decarbonization is engaging toward net zero. It is engaging companies. It's all of those things, and it's comprehensive. And the goal is to get to the same place that you folks are. And I would suggest that putting the term divestment in the top characterizes it as a direction toward one strategy. And the bottom line for me is, how do we get to net zero? How do we get to doing the right thing here? And how do we do that as fiduciaries? And I think that that the title should be about decarbonization, just as the bill is.
Tom, you had your hand up.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. I would agree with Beth in that the definition of a divestment sort of differs from person to person, and it becomes the issue versus where we're trying to get to. And I really hear what Beth's saying. Decarbonization incorporates strategies that we're already incorporating, and we can probably get there quicker. Divestment says get rid of things, to me, and it says it to a lot of different people in regards to, well, how do you get there? And if it's 5 stocks or if it's 200 stocks, it's a big difference on the impact to the pension fund. And so that's why I think reviewing the decarbonization strategy and timeline is a more appropriate title. And it would really set the committee up for a really successful proposal for the legislature next year, I believe, because we could have those specific identifiable benchmarks that we can look for in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years to get to maybe 2040. I personally don't think you'll ever get out completely as long as we have a passive index strategy. And I'll repeat that because there are going to be companies that are caught up in this, that we may have a position that somebody defines in a way that we shouldn't have. I'll use the example of thermal coal, which we got out of a number of years ago. We had $600 worth of it in one of our index funds, and it would have cost the pension trust $70,000 to get rid of it through the original divestment process. So I'm trying to prevent that type of situation and to have a process that we all can live with, so that we can be proud of whatever our carbon policy becomes. So we're willing to work with it, but I just don't want to. I don't want to get lost in the title because that definition can be very inflammatory.
So, Madam Chair, if I could, I'm reading now from the New York State Pension Fund sets net 240 net zero carbon emissions target. And this is developed, this is from the Office of the State Comptroller. And it talks about the 2040, and it does say in here that they're going to continue to engage and divestment may, and the word is may, divestment is a last resort, but it is an investment tool we can apply to companies that consistently put our investments long-term value at risk. So it links it to the value of the portfolio, and it does say that it may be a strategy. It does say engage. So if you're talking about the press and how I think you need to take a look at the actual documents from the New York. I would recommend something that says decarbonization or sets a net zero carbon target, or something to that effect, and leave the inflammatory word out of there, because it is inflammatory, and it also predisposes a conclusion in the process. So that would be my recommendation. And again, I'm reading directly from his document as of December 9, 2000.
2000 and what?
2020.
So I think that if divestment does mean you're no longer there. I don't understand how you can say that is not what divestment means, because if we're saying that we should divest, it means we're no longer investing and we're taking all our investments out. So if
Slowly over time, it
Well-
doesn't say it happens immediately.
But I have a very small retirement fund. It's handled by Fidelity. I have no idea if they invest in. Do any of the rest of you know exactly where your investments are?
No.
Yep, pretty much.
So
So
you don't have any in indexed funds?
Yeah, we have some, but we're pushing hard to get rid of them. Divestment, the action or process of selling off subsidiary business investments or investments.
Yes.
So it's an act and process, and that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a strategy to get to net zero. I agree with you, Beth. Net zero is a good, useful idea. So, we can work on a title. I don't think we need to wordsmith now, but we could work on that.
We have to pass this out today, or we're not going to get it done. It has to be done today. We have 3 more bills that we have to deal with.
Well, I would
And
go back.
so why don't we say an act relating to moving toward a net zero carbon output?
I still think you need, I don't agree that the word divestment is inflammatory. I think that's just weird.
Okay, all right, I don't really care. I don't know that anybody pays attention to titles or not anyway, but
But I think we should say that we want to divest to the greatest extent possible.
Yeah,
Which obviously means that we're not going to do anything ridiculous to undermine the fiduciary responsibilities or tank this pension funds. Nobody's going to want to do that.
okay, then say to the greatest extent possible.
Well, I said it a few
I
times.
know you said it a few times and then people keep arguing.
no.
Yes, did you agree with that?
I have actually written it down. I have an act relating to the decarbonization and phased in divestment to the fullest extent possible from fossil fuel companies.
Okay, it's fine with me. I don't care one way or the other because it's the.
Is that okay with you?
Probably not, but we're either gonna pass this or we're not gonna get it out. It's not gonna happen this year.
If we get the funds to do it, I'd be in favor of that title, because I think you really need the professional opinion and timeline that our staff would be able to complete.
And that's what this is
But that was
about.
the original argument is it's a chicken egg, like if we're gonna get the funds, I'd like to make sure divestment is very fully on the table to the extent possible. So yes, I think we're in agreement. I actually think Russia's an example of exactly what we're talking about. When everyone divested from Russia, anything invested there became worthless. The only way to keep oil and gas exploration from being so lucrative in the future is to divest. There is no other way to stop valuing the destruction of the planet.
I agree with you on that, but fossil fuel companies, there are companies that, my guess is that engage in fossil activities that involve fossil fuels that don't do exploration.
Sure.
So this is not just talking about exploration or new investments. This is talking about all fossil fuel companies. And that would mean in my mind, that means anybody that has any product or does anything with fossil fuels, which includes plastic bottles and I don't know what else is made. These
Everything is
these
made.
pans that I have on are the closest thing to
Solar
crude
panel.
oil that you can
Solar
get.
panels are too, we get it, we get it.
So I don't think that, so let's use Anthony's language here.
Okay. Works for me.
Or also just comment to say that years ago, we decided to sell off tobacco stocks. We divested from tobacco companies. It wasn't inflammatory, it was just the right thing to do.
May I?
Well,
respond to that?
I want to point on that too, because I think the committee needs to understand the complexity involved. We have tens of thousands of positions, and all of whom could have minute impacts or reflect some part of fossil fuel infrastructure. And so it's not as easy as just looking at the portfolio and saying, let's just sell ExxonMobil. The complexity in Vermont needs to be evaluated. And so
That's why we're doing a study.
exactly.
That's the point of the study. See, we get into this thing sometimes where we're talking as if we're doing the study, like, have I read all those documents? No, I have not, because it's not my job to do the study. My job is to say that a study should be done.
So, Madam Chair, if I could, two things. Number one, the tobacco was done by policy of the retirement board after a study was done by then Treasurer Douglas's office, looking at the value of those in the litigation that was coming, and they made a decision. And again, I'm going to emphasize that's called procedural prudence. They took a look, they exercised their fiduciary responsibility, and then made a change.
And that's
because
the
they
same thing that we would be doing here.
no, you're not. No, you're not.
Assuming that these people who do this study are not going to take those things seriously.
May I finish, sir?
Causing the outcome is going to be something that's negative.
May I finish, sir?
Sure.
Thank you. So when we did the study in 2017, the study was to look at the issue and make a decision, the study was on divestment. And the answer was, that's not what you should be doing. And because of cost to the system and concentration risk. Now, if you do a study now and that changes, I'm all good with it. But the point I'm trying to make is that study did have the word divestment in it. That was what they were looking at. And they came up with a conclusion. Whether you like the conclusion or not, that's the conclusion that they came up with. And we developed a 5-point plan based on that. Now we're looking and saying, how do we expand on that and do more? And we're looking at a way to do that within our fiduciary responsibility. And that is what decarbonization is all about. We're looking at that, predisposing the answer, and I keep hearing that, is a violation of fiduciary responsibility because you haven't done the analysis and looked at the options available to you, and that's just not the way to do things. You have to take this and look at the potential strategies and make a rational choice based on it. You're going to get all of the information on January 15th of 2023 so that you can make an informed decision. To determine prior to that divestment is the best strategy, as opposed to, again, the engage, and then consider divestment, or whatever it might be. Let's have an opportunity to look at it, make a rational decision based on procedural prudence, based on doing your studies, and then coming up with the appropriate strategy for this state to achieve both a reduction, a carbon-free portfolio, if that's possible. And again, your point is well taken. The cup that you have has that you're using right now probably was developed with energy, and we have to have the discussion of the proper process. Divestment assumes a conclusion, and I don't think that that's appropriate, and I think it runs contrary to our fiduciary responsibilities, and frankly yours as well.
I'm gonna call an end to this discussion. And I'm going to, so part of me says, we need to move in this direction. I mean, all of me says we need to move in this direction. But part of me says, I don't know where we'll get. I don't know what the best strategies are gonna get. And actually to say that 2017 resulted in nothing is not right, because it did result in changes. So we did make changes there, and we will certainly make changes now, and changes are continuing to happen, and they're not happening fast enough for people, and that is true. But I also want to say that we have to do the best that we can for the climate, for our fund, for our retirees, and for our current employees. And if we don't do that, then we're making bad decisions. And so we need to take this very seriously. It isn't just a matter of saying, we're gonna get out of it, we're gonna be done with this, we're done. And I don't think that's the right direction to take. Because, and if the study in 2017 came up saying, at this point, it would be detrimental to our funds to go in that direction. What if the study in 2023 comes up and says the same thing? What are we gonna do? And this is not, and we had this room full of 350 people a few years ago saying, you need to divest right now, you need to do it right now. And this is not a political statement. We're not doing this to get kudos from the people out there who are pressuring us to do this. If that's why we're doing this, then we shouldn't even be doing it. I just needed to say that, because I think that sometimes we tend to think of whether we're doing something because it really is the very best thing to do, or if we're doing something because we're getting pressure from advocacy groups. So that's all I'm saying.
In the intent of your colleagues.
I'm not talking about us necessarily. I'm talking about in general, that there is a big push. I can't tell you, I'm getting emails that say, you have to divest right now. That's what I'm getting. And people don't. Yes, Senator Rob Hinsdale, and then I think we're gonna end this. We're gonna have the new title, and then we'll see if it passes.
So we never had anyone from the comptroller's office in New York, which I think makes this challenging, but I don't want us to disagree on things that appear in black and white to be factual about the direction that New York is moving in. And when New York announced its 2040 decarbonization plan, it announced immediate divestment from 22 coal companies. It announced that same year divestment from tar sands. And then it announced over the next 4 years, divestment from shale oil and gas, integrated oil and gas like Exxon and Chevron, all oil and gas exploration and production firms, fossil fuel service firms, and fossil fuel transportation and pipeline companies. They started with an immediate divestment plan from companies that focus specifically on the development and transportation of fossil fuels, and then set a plan to decarbonize the rest of their portfolio. I think what the three of us at least are asking for is to move in a direction where we think of the immediate ways that divestment will help devalue companies that are focused specifically on creating more fossil fuels, more carbon emissions as their sole focus as a company, and then decarbonizing the rest of the portfolio. But to take the word divestment out is, I think, a big disservice to the really critical need to devalue what will happen in the next 5 years that will be make or break for this planet. It is not me listening to somebody else. It is not hyperbole. This is what scientists are telling us in very real ways, in consensus around the globe. And it's already here.
I do agree with you, and I think that's what the study hopefully will do. That's not what we're doing.
Right, I
That's
just
what-
want to clear the record about divestment as being core to this.
Okay, and that, I think we did decide to leave that word in divestment to the greatest extent possible.
Can I make one other tiny suggestion, which may or may not, I'm not gonna argue it, but beginning of top page 2, it says that shall consider the feasibility of different decarbonization strategies and review models used in other states for decarbonization. Could we say used in New York and other states for decarbonization? Because we talk a lot about New York, they seem to have a way of phasing it in, that makes sense. Why don't we just make it more clear that we think New York is a decent model?
Sure. We can add New York in there so that it's very clear that New York is,
So look at models used in
highlight
New
is the
York.
model to look at. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, so we have to give these notes to Becky, so what?
And review models used in New York and other states.
Yes.
And the title will now read, an act relating to moving toward a net zero carbon output and divestment to the greatest extent possible.
From fossil fuel companies.
Yeah, of state pension funds.
I think that's fine. I don't know whether your grammar was the best, but it seemed like a clunky sentence, but.
It was a clunky sentence, but
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that I wish we had an expert in the room about net zero versus zero emissions. I think,
I won't put net zero.
I think net zero means like you can mess around with.
how about an act relating to the decarbonization and phase in divestment up to the fullest extent possible from fossil fuel companies,
Yes, okay.
of the state pension, sorry, divestment to the fullest extent possible of the state pension funds from fossil fuel
Okay.
companies, and just make it simply.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay,
I will type this to Becky.
and then adding New York.
Yes, and the 50,000 and the change we made here on lines 12 and 13. And we had asked Tom, remember yesterday, we had talked about the money and said that you could add it in the house, because this will be going to the House and they will.
Well, it'd be
Sure,
good if
take
it's in the
that.
original bill. It would be good if it's there. There's two ways of approaching this. The governor took out an employee that we had requested for all of the other reports that had been asked from Act 75. And so the original budget request had an employee. It's either, I think we could do this either with an allocation of 50 to 60,000 or put back in that extra person that we had asked for to help Eric.
Yes, we should be advocating for that anyway, I think.
I'd love to have an extra person. Eric would love to have an extra person. So
Would you send the $50,000 language to Becky?
75, we're doing 75,
okay,
Okay.
yeah, I'll send the 75,000 language.
and they can spend that. Maybe it is hiring an extra person.
Not that amount. It's too low, I think, Sam.
Eric told me the 100,000 was the amount they took out of our budget for the all-in expenses with salary and benefits. And I'd love to get that back, but that's a different discussion with you.
Yeah.
But I can send you language for either or.
Send us language for what that work would entail,
Sure.
because we'll have to. Yeah, but 75,000 is, I think, what our chair just said.
Okay. We'll put that in.
I think that's what Beth suggested.
Yeah, that's,
All right, are we, have we come to a decision?
Are we gonna try to vote on the kind of,
do you want to wait and see the language?
Inserted, yeah.
Okay, we better not have any more discussion of it though, because we're out of time.
Right, we'll get a new draft tomorrow and hopefully be able to look at it about 1 o'clock, 1:30 when we're back in here.
I was actually hoping that this would have taken about 5 minutes today.
Well, listen, we're getting there. It's,
I've been telling folks 1:45.
okay. Are you
Tomorrow, after 1:45. If you go on the floor at 11, and it's 2 hours. And that's in, I don't know if you're gonna need to grab lunch.
No, we're gonna bring it down here. We're gonna start 10 minutes after the floor.
Okay.
Because we have to get done. Okay. So, okay, so we'll get that language from Becky.
Yeah.
Thank you, and I'm sorry if I got a little testy here.
Okay.
It seemed arguing about one word was making me a little crazy.
It all comes down to that, folks.
Yes.
Not to you go crazy, but to one, two words.
Okay.
We
So,
spent hours on may and shall.
I was hoping that we would have had a new amendment for 176, which is the water thing that I thought he was going to
Yeah.
do something about. No,
I've heard from a couple colleagues. Have people been hearing from other colleagues about this? Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
I have.
what have you heard?
That this is really tough on the city. And that they would, where they are now is they're really wanting very much to have an agreement between the town and the city, with the town basically paying an affiliation amount. And I can't, Mike McCarthy, I think the representatives in the House are feeling very much like this is not a great.
Right, they wouldn't take it up in the House for 3 years or 2 years or something. But I thought that what we were saying was that all we wanted to do was say that no town could impose a property tax based on appraisal of property on the residents of another town. I thought that was as far as we were gonna go. We're not gonna say they can't have an affiliation fee or, but they can't impose a property. Because that's what they're doing.
Right.
It's basically a property tax on people that aren't in their city.
Right.
And if you can do that for this, then why shouldn't Dummerston impose a property tax on the people in the village of Putney because they're closer, Dummerston is closer to the village than the rest of the town.
Montpelier Library could put a property tax on Middlesex, because we use the library.
Right, and you can do a user fee right now,
Right,
but you could also do a property tax on the people in Middlesex. Yeah.
I heard what Allison said as well, and I think the solution we're talking about should be, I guess, benign enough in terms of our part. What I had heard that concerned me is that it might escalate a situation where the city's threatening to cut off water to people, which I don't think is legal. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't want to contribute to escalating a situation that we can't resolve because water is involved.
When we
Right.
talked,
Yeah.
a couple times ago, we had this guy from the city who was testifying. And he basically said, oh, if they wanted to not use our water, they don't have to use our water. He was like really kind of arrogant about it.
He was the city manager and.
Yeah, I just thought his attitude was kind of like daring them to do it, like it's implying that, that get our water.
Yeah.
Well, they'll probably just up the user fee
Right.
to compensate.
Right,
I mean, wouldn't that be kind of logical?
right. No, as I said to Mike McCarthy, I said, he said, well, we need the money. I said, well, charge a higher user fee, do a surcharge.
Well, they could also,
Property tax.
I think the town manager, isn't his name Dominic Cloud, something like that?
Yeah.
Didn't he also say that the town of St. Albans could pay the city $100,000 a year to cover, and then they wouldn't impose the.
True.
So it does seem to me that, I don't know. So maybe maybe we don't want to do anything with this. I
think what I lost track of is that this was at one point in a legal process, like a court process, and it feels like a new law is an over alignment. What's the word I'm looking for? Like kind of an overreaction of some sort to something that should be a court dispute, but I lost track of if court became a dead end for them.
There is legal action.
There was at one
There
point,
was,
I
I
don't know
believe.
if it still is or not. I think that the problem that Corey Parent brought up yesterday, which I thought was a good one, is that this is right now a dispute between the city and the town.
Mhm.
But it could be, unless there's some kind of resolution, other towns could start
Right.
Mhm.
putting property taxes on residents of other towns as a way. I mean, most towns could use more
Right.
money, and so
Mhm.
the Burlington could start putting a property tax on people in Shelburne because they drive on Pine Street. too much.
Right, yeah, the roads, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
I
And
was
then
thinking.
Shelburne could go back on Burlington for a different reason. I
Right,
mean, we could have everybody's,
yeah.
Right,
And currently, towns pay towns property tax. Like we have property, the town of Putney, part of the town forest is in Brookline. We pay property tax to Brookline, I believe,
oh,
because we own property there. But that's different than imposing it on residents.
Mhm. And for water usage, which our property taxes don't usually go to water usage.
is it getting darker or is it?
We don't have the lights on either. And
It was like.
Yeah.
But the screen is, oh,
Are we still,
well, I guess we haven't heard from Tucker yet, have we?
No,
So what else do we need to do here, committee? Let's figure out the
So-
remainder of our time.
what I have on the list for tomorrow is 251, 250, 229, and 176.
What's 229?
That's the ranked choice.
Oh, that's right.
And I have not heard back from
Condos?
Jim Condos or Will Sang.
Well, I think it's condos that's gonna need to come in. He's the,
I invited both.
okay.
We may have to, Senate rules is gonna be meeting, we may have to ask for an extension on that one, given the interest in the pro town.
Well, I think that's for some, when we first talked about it, the Secretary of State said that it's complicated and the way it was done now this, and that it could wait till 2023.
Mhm.
But now he somehow has a path forward for it being very simple if it's just the presidential election. But, so I don't know.
Mhm.
But I still think,
That was my understanding, is that he had a simpler path forward to the presidential.
that's what, yeah, I heard too. Well, so tomorrow at 1 o'clock,
145, she said.
no, I just,
Oh, you changed.
Gail said 1:45, I said 1.
You're optimistic.
10 minutes after the fall of the gavel.
Okay.
We need,
Yeah,
if we're gonna get anything done,
we're right with you, honey, we're your team.
okay. So 10 minutes after the fall of the gavel, we'll first do 251. And get that done, and then it'll be over, and I won't say a word. Except,
You can say as much as you
does
want.
anybody wanna offer a motion? That's what I'll say.
Are we still on?
Yes, we are.
And then, so we'll do 251. And then, we still have some sections of 250. And we were going to do, section 8. I believe, Keisha, you said that was because there was a lot of, agreement around that one. That's the, how do you say it? I've been saying giglio.
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 Giulio files.
Giulio.
The second G is silent.
Giulio.
Giulio files.
But
It's
but
like
most people.
Julio is, but it's Julio.
Yeah.
Most people pronounce it.
Giulio.
Well,
I mean, that's what they.
So, but, okay.
Yes.
But didn't you say there was a lot of,
There seems to, that came up at judiciary last year. Again, law enforcement said, this feels redundant. The AG's office supports it. When we went through it, I didn't hear strong disagreement. So that there's a piece about discovery and there's a piece about it being a registry or publicly available. Julio would have to articulate the value of the registry and how it would work, I suppose. That was their proposal, and I wouldn't want that to hang.
that's the Giulio registry.
Yeah.
Sure, like cannot join us.
Right, he will not be here tomorrow. Thank you. And then who has access to it, right?
Yeah. That might be a longer discussion, but I just think this one is more important than people realize, because it's about how you document misconduct and misclassification of information that keeps someone from being credible on the witness stand. And credibility is a huge part of policing.
So let's do that. Let's do section 8 of 250.
Great. And then maybe it makes sense to try and look at the false information and interrogation language tomorrow. So there's agreement, I don't know.
Oh, and I did talk to, told Sears that I was gonna explain in further detail to him about going in, even if we just did the study. I know you had 3 things: not applying it to juveniles,
Recording.
not applying it to juveniles. The 2 other points on there, I can't remember what they were now.
We're recording all interrogations.
Oh, recording all, right.
And not, I don't know.
Oh,
It's training.
training, and I don't know that you can
Tell them.
prohibit it, but I think what you can do is say that it can't count toward their continuing education units.
Right.
And then
Just disincentivize those kinds of
Yeah.
trainings.
the council can
Right.
say that, because they
Yeah.
determine what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable, so they could say that. So even if we don't put that in here, we could ask them to review how they would word that so that it's maybe not just that training, but how they would
They would have to determine trainings that seem to use false information.
right.
And maybe, Julio was the only person, we didn't have CJC in yesterday, but
Yeah.
maybe it's like in concert with the AG's office, they figure out trainings that are
And
encourage the use of false information. But that one was very obvious and I wouldn't have known that existed. I haven't taught here.
I have to go, I have a meeting at 5.
well, what time is it? I can't,
It is
It's
5.
4:55.
oh, see, I can't see the clock now because of that screen.
Yeah, the screen is.
I think I can move that.
So I did talk to Ben. No, it's okay, Brian, don't.
All right.
I did talk to Ben this morning, and he said that he would have something drafted up by tomorrow.
Great, okay, yeah, I just didn't know if we wanted to close the loop on that before.
Yeah, okay, let me, and then study the whole thing about, yeah, how you use evidence and how you obtain confessions. Right? Okay, and then 229. So
Okay,
we can
it
get
sounds-
condos in here to just tell us what his simple
Yeah,
solution is.
I have a question about a bill that I could wait to ask for it.